since we got all of
Wow.
you in all these different time zones, we'll
So
get
cool.
started. So we're disturbing the morning for some of you, afternoon for others, but hopefully you'll get a lot out of this conversation. So I would like to just start off by introducing myself. My name is Amira Russell. I'm the founder and CEO of the Folklore Group. We own the product, the Folklore Connect, which is a B2B wholesale platform that provides software for diverse brands to manage and scale their wholesale business, and retailers with a marketplace to discover and shop these brands. So we work with brands that are either based in emerging markets like Africa, South America, Asia, the Caribbean, or if they're based in more established markets like the US and Europe, they are just people of color, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, etc. So really working with brands that have been either geographically or racially marginalized from engaging in global retail, wholesale trade. So really excited to be having this conversation today about understanding a buyer's perspective, and what we're going to be covering is, fashion buyers are major drivers in the global fashion retail industry and hold a large influence over what ends up in customers' closet. So we want to be able to understand in this role how they analyze consumer buying patterns and predict future trends by reviewing product movement forecasts based on seasonality, market trends, and the probability of anticipated sale. So today, our panelists are going to talk about how they discover brands, what they look for in the brands, how to maintain good, long-lasting relationships, and the importance of diversity and sustainability in this brand mix. So I want to introduce our guests. To steer the conversation, we have three guests who work to drive consumer choices and ultimately consumer trends. Firstly, we have Gina Lewis from Shop Freetown, Delilah Shannon from Urban Outfitters, and Samendra Chetney from Merchants Online. Sorry, I'm just reading the script. I'm sorry. I was like, well, I know where you are. Okay. So yes, would love to, and then just to have some house rules, please leave your questions in the Q&A channel. We'll answer as many questions as possible along the way, but we'll also have a Q&A segment at the end of the last 15 to 20 minutes. So any questions we don't get throughout, we'll get through then. So I would love to first just have you guys go and introduce yourselves, give a brief background on exactly, what your role is and how it fits into the overall retail ecosystem.
Should I kick it off?
Do it.
Should I do it? Okay. All right. Well, my name's Gina. I'm the founder of Freetown. We're an e-commerce platform that really seeks to amplify diverse brands, and we're really inspired by the style and design and aesthetic of women of the African diaspora. So that's on the continent and that's all across the globe, where our style kind of just penetrates the mainstream. And we're really excited to be here and partner with the Folklore because they also answer that charge in their own way. We operate e-commerce. And so our experience is a digital one, and it's one that focuses on trying to amplify the stories of really creative makers, people that are making product from a cultural point of view. That's really our sweet spot. So.
And could you give us, because I know you have a long history in buying, can you give us a little background of what you did before you started Freetown?
Sure. So Freetown launched in 2021, but prior to that, I worked as a global buyer in home decor for over 10 years. So that experience really served as a base to really know how to move in terms of how to work with vendors and how to import goods and how to work a trade show and all of those things. So this is really a brainchild of, coming out of not seeing the things that I wanted to see as a consumer, and just really seeing what's missing from people who are really curious about the products that speak to them in a more personal way and really speak to their culture. So that's the backdrop, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you.
I can go next.
Yeah.
Is that cool? Okay. I'm Delilah. Nice to meet everybody. I'm currently in Philadelphia. I'm the divisional merchandise manager at Urban Outfitters for branded partnerships. I've been in this industry for over 10 years, about 10 years now. and started as a merchant at J. Crew, and then worked my way over to Urban, where I started as a buyer and then rose up to a DMM position. And I've been here for about 6 years. Urban has 200 stores in North America, and then we have about 30 stores in the EU and beyond. So my job channel and very global. For brands, we obviously have very different, we have a lot of tiers of different brands that we work with. So we work with the big national retailers, the Adidas champions of the world. And then we work with emerging brands. So maybe they're a little bit more established in other markets, but less established here. So like things like Jaded London, for example, in the EU, now we're really bringing to the US, but they have had kind of like a long history already. And then the most exciting part of my job is when we kind of work to discover emerging brands. So really new brands who are just, maybe in the beginning stages of defining their brand identity, but, also have the capabilities to be able to work with a company like Urban Outfitters, where there are some logistical demands that I definitely want to be able to talk you guys through, because it's like a real pain point, I think, for onboarding new brands can be just like the logistical and operation side of like vendor onboarding. But ultimately what I look for is brands that our customer will respond to, that is going to, tell a story or carve out a new space in the marketplace. I'm very passionate about working with brands from marginalized communities as well. And I also oversee all of the DEI initiatives for Urban Outfitters as a total company. So I'm excited that I get to kind of infuse that into my buying work. But yeah, generally just really excited to be here. And every brand that I've talked through the Folklore has been so cool and awesome. So just excited to be able to like help grow the Folklore as well.
Great, thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'll kick it off on my introduction. I just want to say hi to everyone, and I'm really excited to be here as well, and also very excited about the Folklore and Merchants on Long. Basically, I've been at Merchants on Long now as a buyer for 9 years, which is probably the longest I've ever been anywhere. Before that, I had only worked for 3 years. So it tells you something about the company and what we stand for and the whole trust and belief system in the space that we have created as a concept store in Africa. Basically, only stocking designers and artists who produce solely in Africa. Of course, we're all fans of the diaspora as well, but our mandate is made in Africa, and a lot of it has massive social impact as well, and that's something that I really enjoy, besides all the incredible fashion and homeware that is produced on this continent. That's beyond measurable, but the social impact is the fantastic thing about working at Merchants on Long. And I'm hoping to see how we can bridge that with the Folklore as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you. As everyone can see, we have some really talented buyers on this panel. So we'd love to first dig in by, first understanding what really is the role of a buyer.
Do you want any of us to jump in with these
Any of you can jump in.
Okay.
Like, what is, like, give me like the detail. Yeah. This is what we do. This is what we don't do.
Pretty multifaceted, to be honest. It's hard to sum up. I always get nervous when people ask me this at social outings. What is it that you do? What is it that you actually do in a day? It's quite a lot of different tasks. I don't know, you girls can also tell me if you feel this way, but a lot of it is research. Sometimes I feel like I'm an academic, just with my head in lots of research and seeing what are the upcoming trends, what trends work, what trends didn't work in the past, what is something that aligns to the ethos of the company, what can actually be created as well, because you can have lots of ideas, but you need it to be able to be created as well so that it can get to market. But that's just a little bit of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I view it holistically as, we're responsible for delighting and surprising the customer. And that job entails getting something amazing from the maker to a place where she can get it and consume it and take it home. So we're doing everything to selecting that, making sure it's there at the right time, and that we're able to communicate the right size, the right fit, the right colors. Does she have what she needs to make that decision? He or she, or they, and yeah, and continue to really showcase, from that research, as she mentioned, are we introducing new things? Are we staying ahead of the curve? How do we surprise her? How do we really just get what she wants? And yeah, just bringing that to the forefront. So I think that's holistically how I approach the job, is centering the customer first, and thinking about that, because especially when you're working with, a designer or supplier, like everyone's excited about what they make, but it's our job to determine how is that going to make sense to make her want to take it home, make them want to buy it, make them want to own it in their closet, or give it as a gift. So that's how I approach the work, and really just thinking about the end use and then doing all the parts in between to make that happen, which is like, I'm kind of making that sound like a magic piece, but I think that's a part of the buying job. We're magicians,
Yeah, no, it feels that way sometimes. Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I've worked at 2 national retailers now, and buying and merchandising can mean very different things at different companies, but overarchingly, we have a highly analytical job. We're responsible for an open to buy, which is a budget that we obviously, get signed off by finance and by total company, and we have a plan that we need to meet, as any business does. We have margin goals, and those often do factor into how we're able to work with brands. In addition to that, we're constantly looking at current sales and reacting to chase opportunities, whether it be reorders of the same item or chasing into brands that do a similar thing. We're very target focused, I would say. So we've got, a number of brands that we can bring in for a certain period of time. We turn over the floor during a certain period of time. We have a markdown cadence that we have to measure into. So that's kind of like the bigger picture side of things. But then when you get really granular, we're building relationships with the brand. We're picking product and line planning with the brand. We're discussing concerns about, maybe this brand is great in some ways for us, but, this is concerning. The price point doesn't work. Like, how can we figure out a way to make you guys work for our customer? So there's a lot of negotiating and collaborating that happens when we are approaching a new brand to work with them. We're also looking at that brand's market impact, whether it be, usually we're looking at social media numbers, impressions, that kind of thing, but that's not like a barrier for entry. You don't have to have like an insane like media presence or social media presence to work with us, but that always helps, because the way that we view the value out of brands at Urban is that you guys are bringing us your customer who we really want to satisfy. So there's like a little duet that's happening there. And so, ultimately we want you to be successful also. We don't want to have a brand that doesn't do well. So we want to really make sure that things fit in all of these parameters so that it'll be a success for you and for us. And then, we have a lot of executive facing meetings where we really have to kind of argue for, or rather articulate why we think a certain brand is valuable. So there's so many different levels that we work on this kind of collaboration.
I love that. So many great things that you mentioned, that all of you mentioned, that we're going to speak more about during this session. So my question, Delilah, for you is, when and how often are you buying products? Do you follow that traditional US and European buying calendar?
Oh, yeah and no. We do. It's constant. It's a constant thing. And that's something that actually surprised me when I started working in branded, because before this, I did categories. So I did denim and pants and jeans and skirts and that kind of thing. So I did like product development, and now I'm more outward facing. But yeah, wait, what was your question? Oh my God.
The question was, how often are you buying products?
Sorry. So yeah, those market those market periods happen, we do meet during those periods because that's when brands are showing digital.
Just for everyone who's tuned in, what are those market seasons that buyers are usually focused on?
So the major ones for us are spring and fall for women's wear, but that's just, again, for how we operate at Urban. Every retailer, like the size depends on the kind of the market and the market cadence, but there's a contemporary calendar, as we know, there's all different calendars happening. So I would say spring and fall are the big market appointments, but then we're constantly getting, line sheets all the time for spring, summer, fall, winter, resort 1, resort 2, whatever it is. So we're constantly working in that regard. And then we're also constantly mining for brands. So that can happen very off cadence. That happens, organically, and it takes time. So that is like an all year kind of overarching thing. We don't actually, we definitely don't really buy into specific seasons as much as we just buy into months and month drops now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say similarly, we are constantly looking, having conversations, building relationships, and looking for new. And for us, especially when you're smaller and your specialty, the goal is simplicity with anyone that you're approaching. Because obviously, the bigger it gets, the more complexities you have. Our key is really just keeping it simple and seeing kind of like what the easiest way is to get started. What is the designer most excited about? How can we test? How can we try? And that can happen at any given time, right? So I think, there's a traditional calendar, but kind of just thinking back to, again, like what's the customer's end use? Can it get here in time for a time that makes sense? Okay, how do we make it happen? And that's really just kind of the approach that I've just learned in my previous world in training, having bought in a more, non-traditional sense. If you can make it work and you can make a deal, great. And is it going to be exciting and compelling? That conversation can happen, 52 weeks out of the year.
Mm-hmm. And Samandra, I want to ask you, because, Merchants on Long started out in Cape Town, Cape Town is actually the opposite season of the US and Europe. So when it's winter here, it's summer there, but you're also buying for your London store as well now. So my question to you is kind of like so a lot of these international brands are trying to enter like this US and UK market for the first time, but they may also be based in a Cape Town or in a Nigeria where the weather is different. So how would you suggest brands adapting their collections to appeal to these US and UK retailers, or should they really be adapting at all?
So I think that's a great question. Basically, my number one bit of advice in that sense, when you're trying to fit into different seasons, is to look at it in a less seasonal approach, to be more trans-seasonal, where items can move in between different seasons and customers can get wear out of it in however many different situations they need to be in. But for us, it's weird in South Africa. It's not like you go through all the stages of different seasons. It's summer and winter, basically. But in Cape Town, it's just a bit of rain in winter. That's the only difference. So I don't place too much importance on having a full, at least for fashion, having a full stock range of winter, autumn, winter, or fall, or spring, summer. I would say generally we have been more successful with spring, summer to resort wear as well. And also we're quite small, so England is still new to us. We're still branching out. We're still learning all the tricks. But I would say buying smaller and buying more considerate pieces that can move in between the seasons. So my advice is to kind of throw the rule book out when it comes to seasons and design according to, your inspiration, but for items that you would imagine someone who travels the world wearing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Seasonality is important, but it's not critical anymore. And especially because we have such a global market, and, you know, it's buy now, wear now. It's very much like at any point in time, someone could be shopping for outerwear and could be shopping for a mini skirt. So, you know, we do have like, we want our summer floor set to look summer. We want our holiday floor set to look holiday, but there's nuance in there. We probably would never launch like a really summery feeling brand line in holiday. Like their styles don't sell well during that time. So we just wouldn't do that. So if we were working with a brand, say, like Samandra was just talking about, we would want to see some, at least a balance. We, you know, knowing that the brand might really usually just cater to warmer weather, we would still want them to do that, but also to take into consideration the climate that we're going to be marketing in. So it definitely needs to be a conversation, because the last thing as a buyer that we want is to bring in product that's just not going to sell. And if it's not selling because it's seasonally inappropriate, that's a manageable mistake. So that's not something we like to see.
So it's kind of also based off of delivery time. So when that collection, when you're 100%. Producing that collection and when it will deliver, that delivery window needs to be what you're serving like that season.
And that's a great point too, because depending on the freight and the shipping mode, sometimes it takes up to 2 months to get product to our DCs, and that's just how it is. So, you know, it takes them 2 months to get to our DC, and then it takes maybe a couple of weeks to get to the floor and then be put out on the floor. So you're looking at maybe like 3 months out from when you're shipping the goods. So when you're presenting to us, knowing that like you may be in a totally different season than you thought. So it's a good thing it's a good conversation to have, you know, especially if it's something where, and something that we can do too, sometimes at Urban is we'll ask for SMUs, which is our exclusive styles. So we'll buy in line and be like, okay, this is great, but we need a couple of other items to balance it out to make it a little bit more seasonally appropriate. So that's another way we work through that, is like designing exclusive and specific items to help round that assortment out.
Gotcha. Okay. And so my next question is around pricing, which I think is something that a lot of, you know, emerging brands struggle with. What is that typical retail markup that you are looking to achieve? And how would you suggest brands really calculate their wholesale and retail prices so that, you know, it both appeals to a retailer, but they're also able to make a profit and still have it align with like what their customers want?
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of thoughts on this that might be non-traditional, but I would say that it's important for any designer who is in whatever market you're looking to go into or whatever retailer you're looking to go into, like observe their price points and study that, because that's a very like visible, accessible tool that is going to help you just have like at least a baseline, right? Because you never want to be like shrinking the quality of your goods to make it fit a certain equation. You want to find the right home for where your price point and your aesthetic and your quality sits. And I think that sometimes we perceive like high-end brands or a luxury brand to communicate the only way that something is more expensive than something else. But niche, you know, innovative creativity, people that are mindful of sustainability, like these are also great stories that create value to the customer. So I just, you know, I'm very hesitant to say like back into a price point because you want to have mark on, or, you know, show me one version and then produce it a different way and you lose out on the quality. Because you know, for somebody like me, that's a piece that it's like, no, if you have the bells and whistles, she's more likely to pay more for that. So it's really about constructing a garment, you know, and then having a concept of like, okay, well, I made all the bells and whistles and now it's like $1,000 and we don't have any dresses over $395. You know, like you kind of want to have some like relative boundaries. And again, that's all available and designers should be aware of that. But, you know, just to be careful about, you know, when you're entering territory, especially when you're really special and you're new, like don't water it down, you know, before you get a chance to really put out there what you're trying to make. And I guess that really just goes for like specialty, new craft things. You know, and I know that's different for mass market retailers, but, you know, for people that might be looking to start out, you know, just, I don't know if that directly answers the question, but that would be my point of view on that.
Thank you.
I feel like diametric to that is like we work into a price point a lot of times at Urban. For like the small emerging new brands, like Gina was saying, I would never ever want to be establishing or introducing you to the world in a matrix that doesn't make sense for where your brand is headed. So if you're positioning yourself as like a $200 to $300 brand, like I would not want to take you and introduce you to the masses at $100 AUR, because that's not where your future lies, and that's not what you're doing. You're creating something that is way more valuable. So we have buckets that we have to kind of assort into, and I can't have too many brands that are over $150 AUR per season, because those are brands, or those are items that just don't sell as much volume. I'm not going to make my sales plan, that kind of thing. So we do pay attention to it, and we do, like Gina was saying, it's definitely helpful to look at our website, because we have, obviously an Urban product, but then we have a ton of other brands that we carry. So you can kind of see where we're at and what we would or wouldn't be open to. But I think I also recommend, in addition to just looking at the website, like think about the customer, think about who you would be reaching with this collaboration, and knowing that our customer is Gen Z, millennial, really a lot of high school students, to be honest, thinking about disposable income and how they perceive value in this world currently, which is very different from, I think, 10 years ago. Then, these are all important things to consider, because it's a very competitive landscape right now. There's so much stuff to sell. There's so many brands. So she wants something that is going to not break the bank. At least that's our customer's mindset.
And what's the markup typically? So if somebody has, so there's wholesale pricing, which is what you all buy it for, and then there's retail pricing to what you sell sell it to the customer for. What is usually that standard markup?
We look for, yeah, that's a hard question, because for a small emerging brand, I'd say like this traditional 2.5 to get us to like a 50 or 55% IMU. That's like expected. To scale a brand, like I need like a 65 to 70 margin. And that's just because of like what the current targets are at our total company level. But of course, like I have some national brands in the mix that give me a 68, and then I've got some tiny brands that give me a 50, and figuring out how to like even that out is my job. But I wouldn't expect like a new emerging brand to be offering me anything above like a 55, and even a 55 would be generous. I would say 50 is expected.
I can totally relate to that as well. So we have quite a few brands at different price points, and especially because it's a concept store, there are different items. A candle's not going to cost the same as a dress, etc., etc. But the markup also varies, and that's because we don't want to squeeze the brand into a specific wholesale price point for us, because it goes against sort of our thinking of fair trade and just being very, transparent with our customers. We're trying to sell you the story as well. So it's also what Gina was saying earlier. There's something very special about niche, and in that story, consumers are now more considerate when they're purchasing. They're more aware of sustainability and slow fashion, and that does come at a higher price point. So it is something to consider, but we then don't always mark it up as high as we would like to mark it up to make a certain profit point. But it's just how we introduce it and how we can work together and I guess collaborate in the future to have more items that are made specifically for us, where we have a little bit more leeway, the price points.
And I think that just goes back to the magic, like that's the buyer's job, is to not overwhelm, especially new and emerging designers. Like, I don't need to overwhelm you with language and metrics. It's my job to figure it out or communicate what it's going to take to figure it out. That's the relationship building piece. And, one way that new emerging brands can do that is maybe just kind of like expanding and trying a bunch of different things. What are some things that are really cost effective for them that help them like really tell their brand message, so really it's like kind of like line extension. If you've got really expensive things that are beautiful, but then how else can you interpret your brand language into other SKUs, I think that's also really helpful, because then the buyer just has more to play with and more to choose if they're really invested in trying to bring you to life in their platform or in their store.
Yeah. No, I thank you all for really breaking that down in a way that, first, you all have diverse answers because you have different types of companies, which is what I love about this. I've just been getting some questions about the like what's IMU, what's AUR. I've been writing the answers in the chat, but as soon as you guys say like a cool retail acronym, if you want to just explain what that is, when just because we have you newbies on the call, but so let's really talk about what it takes to discover a brand. Can you kind of share some of the drivers or deterrents when considering taking on a new brand? What are you looking for? How do you determine if a brand is retail ready?
Yeah, I can start. I think that, well, the first thing I look for, because right now we're a 50-year company, so we've got a long history and we've always carried brands. So it's definitely very different than I think like a more contemporary retailer. But yeah, I mean, I look for something our customer has not seen before. I look for something that fills a hole that we have currently in our assortment. So I look for brands that are going to kind of reinforce some of the bigger trends that we as a total company are standing for. So for example, if there's like this coquette kind of trend that's happening right now, very ruffly white, kind of like bridal, you're kind of like seeing that out there right now. So internally, we're doing a lot of like marketing moments where that styling is very coquettish. So if we have that at Urban and it's, we're sitting at our price point of like between $70 to like $100, then having a brand that does that, but way more valuable in a way more valuable way, or a way more designed way, a way more artistic way, a way better executed way, honestly, that's really valuable to us, because then that can help us better tell the story that we need to tell for our internal sales, in addition to obviously helping our customer kind of see that there's a range of how you can get to the trend. I would say that something that makes it a little bit harder for us to not necessarily want to onboard, but it puts a little kind of asterisk next to it, is just the logistical capabilities, because for us it's a bandwidth thing. We have to, in order for us to onboard new vendors and manage them through the process, it's a lot of work for my team. And we have an operations team we have a vendor management team, but ultimately the buyer is the point of contact with the brand. We hold the relationship. So we end up doing a lot of the explaining and helping of like, okay, this is how you sign up for Tradestone, which is like our PO system. It's a really annoying system to use. It actually probably takes like a designated person to manage that part of your business. That's the logistics, that's the packing, the shipping standards. Like, we have very strict standards that need to be followed in a very long and intensive guide. And if you don't follow, like if the instructions, if there's a mistake made on a PO, on anything, we issue chargebacks. And that's like something I can't control, because that's just our DC is like, if you don't ship things correctly when we receive them in, it takes us more time to go through it. So we're charging you back for that. If you don't ticket things correctly, like little things like that are in this huge guide can be missed. And then ultimately it just ends up being like a really kind of uncomfortable and not enjoyable experience, because at the end of the day, it reflects in the payment and how long that takes to get. So it can really mess up your money if you had mistakes on your POs, because then we have to work through it with AP. And, currently I'm dealing with this like right now, is like a brand we're just trying to reconcile and make sure they've gotten paid their full amount. And there's a discrepancy between what they think they're owed and what AP sees. And it's because of a PO discrepancy. So I could go on forever about this, just because I just really can't express enough how important it is to have support on your team to be able to manage logistics when you're working with a big company like Urban, where like I can't control what AP or accounts payable or our DCs, our distribution centers, do with your POs. Because if they were not done correctly, not packed correctly, I can't control the chargebacks. So we have a lot of parameters, and it pains me when I feel like a brand is struggling or they're disappointed or they're not getting it, because it's like, it's really intensive and it's really stressful. So definitely want to ensure that the brand that we're going to be working with kind of is ready to sign up for that amount of work. That's kind of one of the bigger things I'm looking at lately. And that's purely because business is tough right now. The climate is tough and teams are bogged down trying to fix the business. We don't have a lot of time right now. I don't have a lot of capacity to be like holding hands, which I want to do because I love brands. Like I want to hold your hand, but I just like, I don't have the capacity. My team doesn't have the capacity. So I really want to make sure that the brand that we would onboard is like ready to like do start to finish, like what it entails to really ship product to Urban.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's something I tell a lot of people. And they're like, oh, okay, I need to start making hires. I'm like, your second to third, maybe fourth hire, if you want to get into wholesale, needs to be somebody specifically on your team that just focuses on wholesale, not your wholesale and marketing manager, not your wholesale and your wholesale because that is it's a business in it of itself. So if you're hiring an e-commerce manager to do your D2C, you should be hiring somebody who's going to manage your wholesale in-house. So just thinking a bit about, the Folklore Connect, we're an online wholesale platform. And, so things have really changed from just being trade shows and showrooms and runway to, people buyers taking the process online. So would you say your buying, discovery, and ordering process has moved more digital? And how important is it that brands have, the wholesale, have their wholesale business online as well?
I think it's augmented, for me, in my buyer training, you got to touch it, you got to see it, you got to be able to feel it. So I think that the digital landscape, and unfortunately coming out of the pandemic when everyone had to shift to how are we going to continue to conduct business when we can't be in person, everybody's tools got better. So I think that's a good thing. But I think relationship wise, nothing is better than being in person and working with a person and understanding their point of view, and then actually being able to assess the quality, ask the questions, and having the product right in front of you. That's the joy that I get, as a buyer, as a founder in this space. And so, you want to make sure that you know exactly kind of what you're getting. So even though, you have with wholesale platforms like Folklore Connect, it's great to be able to have digital meetings and virtual meetings, even do that quickly, right? And I think that's great. And being able to have all of your information accessible prevents, you can save a lot of time, i.e. are your line sheets correct? Do you have all the details? Is the country of origin correct? That's going to help me do all of my homework faster so that when we are together, we're able to tackle a lot more, in person rather than having to do kind of like the grunt work when we didn't have those digital tools, if that makes sense.
I would say that I agree with that. Firstly, it's always better to be able to touch and feel the product, especially because great photography can only go so far. But I have to also say it's been fantastic just being able to get onto the platform and speak to designers and learn more about designers in a quick half an hour chat. And then the next chat be someone from a completely different country. So you wouldn't get that in real life, really. So it's great to be able to do that. And then to go to one designated area where you can find these designers' line sheets. I would say that having the wholesale price there is so necessary, but also just the fabric makeup and composition, as well as really good photos, because I think that my only issue with online purchasing for ranges is that I can't at least purchase off of the CAD drawings. I'd really need the photography, and the more photos, the better, because it does help you to kind of get an idea for who would wear this. Is this your customer? Is this gonna appeal to them? So a lot of that has to do with information, and the more information, the better if we're going to do it online.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with my questions and tune into the audience to see what they're looking for. So I have one question. Do buyers prefer to work with salespeople, or is working directly with the brand okay? So I'm assuming that means, do they prefer working with a showroom or somebody in-house at the brand?
It just, for on my end, I don't have a preference. I just prefer to work with whoever is going to be the fastest and most expeditious with responding. Like whoever you guys have designated as the right person for us to interface with, I would never challenge that. My expectations would just be that you've connected me with the person who's going to be able to provide all the answers to my questions. So whether that be the salesperson or just the brand, the showroom or the brand, it doesn't really make a difference. I prefer to be like connected with the brand because I like to know the brand. I like to know who's behind it and what they're about. But from a logistical standpoint, it just matters that the person has the right answers.
Okay. And so everyone right now, this is your time to put your questions in the Q&A. So what key factors do you consider when you're assessing a collection or look to see if it would do well in the market?
I think for Freetown, we have a specific focus on obviously things that celebrate culture. And from my own vantage point, I'm a textile enthusiast. I love texture. I love bold color. And so, and we're kind of in our infancy in which we get the luxury to really choose that. And so, something that's unique, that's different, that's offbeat is going to catch my eye quicker than evaluating something that's just going to be more alike to something else that's already in the market that probably has an already established foothold, right? So when people come to us, they're looking for something that either it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I found this and it's so limited, or oh my gosh, I know this would be the perfect gift for somebody who has everything. So, and because we like to kind of take apart and deconstruct and really think about how is the customer seeing something, and we do the curating, it doesn't necessarily need to be a whole collection, to be honest. I mean, we want to see what you're putting together and where your thoughts are, but if I like those 3 things, can I get those 3 things, and how fast can we get them? And then you can kind of build from there. So I think flexibility is key. And when looking at the designer or the vendor, the suppliers, how flexible can they be? Are they willing to let us to kind of play, knowing that we know our customer base, the best? Some people are inflexible in that way. They're like, if we only want to sell the whole collection, or we don't want to sell it at all. And that's totally fine, but that takes away our magic to really kind of get what's going to drive the sales and drive the bus. So I think your question was about how, what are we looking for? I would say just something that's really unique and being flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Something that doesn't look like a product is what I look for. Something we can't do, which is, there's a lot of, it's interesting too, because I think a lot of brands think that we want stuff that looks like us, like jersey material or fleece wear. And it's that's cool and everything, but we do that day in and day out. What I'm looking for is the thing that's going to make urban product look better, because it looks better than the product. So, I want something that has an artistic angle and a brand identity, something that is going to stand out on the floor and not blend in with the rest of our on-floor assortment.
So we buy quite, sorry.
No, I'm just trying to get it through as many questions as possible. Okay. So do you want to answer the next one? Okay. Yeah. So can we talk about payments and the typical turnaround time? What are the standard payment terms that brands should understand?
Okay. Well, this is an interesting one because we work with so many different brands and from so many different areas. It really is important to put your payment terms up front so that we know in the invoice. I think the general consensus for us is that we do pay a deposit up front and then we pay the remainder upon delivery.
So
Urban's the traditional oops, sorry.
Oh no, you can continue.
We're net 60, which is really challenging. However, when working with new brands, like I have the ability to go to finance and be like, this brand requires a prepayment to work with them. We need 30% now. And then usually the 70% that follows would be net 30 or net 60. So that means like 60 days after the product has been received into our DC. So it's a while till you get the full payment. Like the one that I'm reconciling right now was for a drop that we did in October. So the vendor is still chasing for this like final payment, which we don't see on our end, but he does on his end. So it takes a while.
And how do brands fund production? What are some ways that you know that certain brands will fund production if they can't receive deposits and they know it's going to be net 30, net 60?
That's a good question for a brand. I think I actually don't know.
I mean, typically we say that's the cost of doing business, you know, that would be the general statement. But I do think that in this day and age, you know, for a brand there, it's just kind of consider how you look at your whole pie, right? Do you have a direct to consumer business where you're able to like fund some of that? You know, do you have a few wholesaler accounts that do give the deposits so that you can do the big one when it comes to if getting into a bigger retailer or a mass merchant is your goal, you know, kind of looking at the whole pie to make that happen. Because again, to your point, a retailer, like, you know, the Urban Group, that's standard. That is industry standard in the US. You know, I think for smaller retailers, you know, we buy smaller, so we work a little bit more close to teeth. So I would say my answer to that question is it depends on what it takes to open the brand. But it's a tricky, it's difficult, I would say.
Okay. For smaller brands, how many units per piece or per size run are you normally looking to order? And do you typically place smaller brands at all doors, certain doors, flagships, just online?
So it's with us, with smaller brands, emerging brands, those are the ones we really tend to go for and go after. We have like some big name brands, but also emerging brands. But it really does depend on price and demand. If it's something that is super unique and you want to keep that in a niche market, we're going to just do one of each size. But if it's something a little bit more ready to wear and easy to sell, then that's when the numbers for each size go up. So it would be 2 or 3 even.
And for Urban Outfitters, what would that look like?
Different end of the spectrum, yeah. I would say for small, new emerging brands, we'll either do a direct test to start, so just online, or our Halo door group is what I call it. It's like for the brands that are really gonna like amplify the space. That's about like 10 doors. So that would be probably the maximum door group I would ever introduce a brand new brand in. So with that said, if it was just a direct play, we might want as few as 20 units, or we might want as many as 100. It really depends on the brand's capacity, honestly, and what in the commercial viability. But if we're to go to stores, you know, that can be anywhere from like 100 to 200 to 300 units, I would say, for an initial buy. Once you get to all doors, for us, that's like at least 2,000 units about to get to all doors for most things that are sized alpha sizing, meaning extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. Oh, that's another good thing to talk about is just sizing. It's really, really important because we're obviously talking to an international audience that you have sizing conversion information on your line sheets, in addition to price point or MSRP, so suggested markups, your wholesale cost. And then I saw a question about MOQs. It's meaning minimum requirements. It's so helpful to have that info as well. So please be really specific. Like if you have a 50 unit cut minimum, which is what I would look at, is like how many units do you need me to buy? Then I need to know that up front, because if it doesn't, like that could be a non-starter for us, just depending on the health of the business. So it's really great to include all of that information up front on your line sheet.
Okay. Ditto on the sizes. Ditto on the sizes.
Sizing is so confusing, honestly.
Inches, centimeters, everything. Yeah. We need everything. Draw it on a mannequin. Do you do the bust in the same place? We need it all.
All right, so I have a great question here. What is the best way to approach buyers as an emerging designer who doesn't necessarily have a large following yet? I'm in the boat that as a part of my marketing strategy, getting into wholesale is integral to building the brand awareness, but I can't seem to grasp the attention of any buyers just via email, even at the smaller independent boutiques to set up a live appointment. Before they answer that, that's why you joined the Folklore Connect, because you were able to create your profile. All of the retailers on our platform have access to see your profile, and you have your digital showroom, have your products. And so all of these 3 buyers that are on this call right now all use Connect, and they source brands from Connect. So that's one way, but I'll let you all take that answer and answer it as well.
So I find that really interesting because I'm constantly getting emails, and we really do try, like as a team, our best to answer everyone's email when they send in a line sheet or information. But if you are trying to reach people, I've also found, weirdly enough, I don't know if anybody else relates to this, but I also don't mind being DM'd on Instagram. I found so many amazing brands that way, and it's usually me DMing them. But when I get one as well, I think it's fantastic. So more than happy for emails or Instagram or Folklore.
And when they do send an email, what should they include in that email?
I mean, if it's a sales pitch and they have a line sheet ready and they've done the research and they think it's a good fit, I would say just send it, because likely you're trying to land in the hands of a buyer, right? But I can also see, like, you want to get a response before you send the line sheet, because if you're smaller, you might be concerned if, an idea gets lifted. So I can totally understand why you'd want to receive contact first before you send everything. But, I work, Freetown is a startup, but I've worked at bigger companies. And I do think that as a buyer, it is our job as best we can to get back to everyone, to follow up via email. So I say, don't be shy, just keep emailing. We are busy. We get a lot of emails, but I would say just don't give up. I'm also not offended by DMs. And LinkedIn is also a good source too, but the wholesale platforms make it easy. So wholesale platforms, like Folklore Connect, and there's others too, that's just a great way to get started. That's not going to have you spinning your wheels, because again, that's the platform's job to bring in those buyers. So hopefully a combination of all 3 will help your brand get the exposure that you're looking for your wholesale strategy.
Well, thank you. Those are all the questions we can take. The last one that I'll just answer, because I see it, is how does the Folklore Connect determine what brands they'll have on? We are really vet the brands that we work with, so that the retailers that use the platform know that they have brands that they can trust and that'll be reliable, that also align with what they're looking for. So we look at things like price point. We look making sure you have a contemporary price point, and that you produce at least 1 new collection a season. You've been in business for over 2 years. You are either a person of color or based in an emerging market. So those are just some of the things. And yes, showrooms and sales reps can join on behalf of the brand that they work for. They would just create a brand showroom with their details. So I would like to thank all of you for coming. I'm sorry we couldn't answer all of your questions. There's some really great ones, but want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you all again for joining. Thank you, amazing panelists. And if you guys want to shout out where they can find you, follow you, this is your time.
My Instagram handle is Delilah Noel. It's DALILANOEL. So feel free to reach out.
Mine, go ahead.
Okay. Mine is just Sumendra Chetty, one word. So if you can spell that, then great. You can follow me.
Our shops is Shop Freetown, SHOPFREETOWN. On Instagram, I'm Miss Gina Lewis on Instagram as well, my personal account. And you can find us at FRTWN.com. And yeah, that's all the things.
Amazing. And you can find us at the Folklore. Make sure you can apply as a brand, apply as a retailer, and also you can follow me at Amira Rasul. So thank you all again. Have an amazing weekend, and I shall see you at the next one.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.